Hello and welcome back. By now, most of us have read the headlines. We know the name of the cities, we've seen the maps. We've heard how drones were launched, how over 400 missiles flew in retaliation, and how precision airstrikes were coordinated in minutes. We even know the type of bomber used America's B 1 Lancer, a long range supersonic aircraft built to dominate skies. The cities attacked, the number of casualties, the weapon systems used, those facts are already out there. But here's what is often missing in these reports. Why did this happen? Who really benefits? And who pays the price beyond the headlines? Let's begin with Iran and Israel. Many forget they were once allies back in the 1960s and 70s during the Shah's regime. Oil deals, military cooperation, and even intelligence sharing. However, that changed after the 1979 Iranian Revolution when Iran declared itself an Islamic republic and became openly critical of Israel and the West. Since then, Iran has supported a network of non state armed groups across the region, like the Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, militias in Syria and Iraq. Critics call this a proxy strategy that destabilizes the region. Supporters say Iran is standing up for oppressed groups against Israeli and Western influence. Israel, on the other hand, believes in preemptive self defense. It doesn't wait to be attacked. It targets threats before they materialize, whether it's suspected nuclear facilities in Iran or rocket stockpiles in Gaza. Its strikes are often described as surgical, but the outcomes are not always clean. Civilian areas are hit, children die, infrastructure collapses. And then there's the United States of America. Its role has shifted over time. Under President Obama, the USA signed the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, in 2015 to limit Iran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. However, in 2018, President Trump pulled out of the deal, calling it weak and one sided. That withdrawal escalated tensions. And when he threatened overwhelming retaliation and then pulled back, it felt less like a strategy for peace and more like a performance of misplaced pride. Now, under heightened pressure, the USA is back in the middle, not as a mediator, but as a military power. It supports Israel military while also calling for restraint. And that's a contradiction hard to ignore. And here's the real question. Does the cycle of attack and counter attack actually solve anything? We say these wars are about security, but what kind of security leads to thousands of children growing up in fear? What happens to the animals, the forests, the water, the power lines? What happens to the mental health of an entire generation that knows more about air raid shelters than school textbooks? And what about accountability? How many of us know how much taxpayer money from the US or the West goes into these conflicts? How many of us understand the long term impact of sanctions, not just on governments but on everyday people who can't access medicine, jobs, or clean water? A friend recently asked me, what would you do if someone told you they were building a bomb to kill your family? It's a valid question, but the problem is every side in this conflict says the same thing. And that's the tragedy. No one sees themselves as the aggressor, everyone believes they are just responding. So, where does this end? Here are some questions worth asking. Can Iran truly separate resistance from militancy? Can Israel justify every civilian casualty in the name of national security? Can the USA continue to sell weapons and then ask for de escalation with a straight face? Can we, as global citizens, stay neutral when human sufferings become routine? And beyond the geopolitics, can we talk about what war does to the environment, to animals, to people who don't want to take sides but are forced to choose between silence and exile? This commentary was created with the help from someone who usually stays in the background, the unheard voice shaping these videos. He reminded me that understanding doesn't require agreement, it requires humility. And that's what is missing in this conflict. Humility from all sides. This is not about defending one country over another, it's about defending truth, accountability, and human dignity. So the next time we see footage of bombings and strikes, ask who ordered this, who benefits, and who suffers and will keep suffering long after the news cycle ends. As we reflect on these events, one thing is clear: there are no clean answers, no side is completely innocent, and no one wins when violence becomes the language of power. But what we can do, each of us, is refuse to normalize it. We can ask better questions, we can hold space for more than one truth, and above all, we can choose not to look away. As we ponder, let us pray the escalation dies down, not just on paper, but in policy, on the ground, and in the hearts of those who decide whether tomorrow brings another missile or a moment of peace. This isn't just Iran versus Israel, it's not just East versus West, it's us versus our better judgment. America is not its bombs, Israel is not its occupation, Iran is not its proxies. They are people. This is Kahaaniyat, not from the war room, but from a place of pause and perspective. When stories aren't about sides, but about what we risk losing when we stop listening. If this made you pause, question, or reflect, like, share, and subscribe so more unheard voices find space, so more stories get told. Not louder, but deeper.